On a crisp spring morning in the quiet town of Cedarwood, the sun was just beginning to paint the streets with warm hues of gold. The air was filled with the familiar sounds of everyday life, birds chirping softly, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, and the distant hum of early commuters. It was the kind of day that promised nothing more than simple routines and peaceful moments. At the heart of the town stood Cedarwood Market, a modest grocery store that had been a community staple for decades. Locals would come not only for their weekly groceries, but also to catch up with neighbors, share stories, and connect. This particular morning, the market buzzed with its usual mix of elderly shoppers, busy parents, and teenagers, Gratheo Dan Y đã thống nhất và hướng dẫn trong file upload. Trình bày và ngắt nghĩ phù hợp để chuyển đổi text to speech để tăng cảm xúc khi nghe. Không có các ký tự lá tránh gây nhiều khi chuyển thể TTSing snacks before school. The cashier greeted everyone with a smile, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of ripe fruits and baked bread. Inside the market, Jason Reynolds moved with calm assurance. At 42, he carried himself with a quiet confidence honed from years of dedicated service as a federal agent. His sharp eyes scanned the aisles as he carefully selected fresh produce, his demeanor steady and composed. Jason was well known in the town, not just as an agent, but as a man who valued justice and fairness above all else. Today, like any other, he was blending into the crowd, a face among many savoring the simple pleasure of a peaceful morning. Nearby, a young officer named Kyle Matthews was beginning his shift. At just 26, Kyle was fresh from the academy, eager to prove himself, but burdened with the heavy weight of ingrained biases and the pressures of his new role. His gaze flickered repeatedly towards Jason, a man he recognized from past encounters, but not with respect, rather with suspicion and a simmering doubt. Kyle's mind raced with conflicting thoughts, shaped by stories and stereotypes, rather than the reality standing right before him. The atmosphere in the market was one of routine normalcy, but beneath the surface, tension quietly simmered. For Jason, it was just another day, a chance to go about his life with dignity and purpose. For Kyle, it was a moment fraught with uncertainty, a test of authority, and an unconscious struggle against prejudice. As Jason reached for a loaf of bread, their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange charged with unspoken meanings. To the casual observer, it might have seemed insignificant, just two men passing in the grocery store. But for Jason and Kyle, it marked the beginning of a confrontation that would shatter the calm and ripple far beyond the walls of Cedarwood Market. This is where the story truly begins, not just with a routine shopping trip, but with the collision of experience and inexperience, calm and chaos, justice and prejudice. The seemingly ordinary day held within it the seeds of a dramatic encounter that would expose raw truths and challenge the very fabric of the community. Because sometimes, in the quietest moments, the loudest storms are born. And the lessons we learn from those storms shape not just individual lives, but the soul of a society. So let's step back and watch. Listen closely as this story unfolds, a story of courage, of confrontation, and ultimately, of change. Before we get started, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from and what time it is. We'd love to see how far this story has traveled and who it's touching along the way. All right, let's jump right into the story. The moment Officer Kyle Matthews stepped into Cedarwood Market that morning, the weight of his new badge felt heavier than the sunlit sky outside. At 26, freshly graduated from the police academy, Kyle was eager to serve and protect, Yet beneath his crisp uniform and steady stride lingered an unease that not even he fully understood. Raised in a town not far from Cedarwood, Hull's world had been shaped by the stories and attitudes of those around him. Family, friends, neighbors, all of whom carried their own versions of fear, mistrust, and unspoken biases. From an early age, Gulal had absorbed these subtle lessons like a sponge. His upbringing was steeped in a culture where law and order often meant suspicion toward anyone who didn't fit a narrow mold. Now, standing amid the aisles of fresh vegetables and canned goods, Kyle's eyes darted repeatedly toward Jason Reynolds. There was something unsettling about the man. Calm, confident, and composed qualities Kyle admired, yet also envied. And more dangerously, Jason's presence stirred a gnawing uncertainty that Kyle masked behind a stern expression. Kyle had been trained to react swiftly, decisively, to trust his instincts when assessing threats. But those instincts were entangled with years of cultural programming, of fear passed down without question. The academy drilled into him the importance of reading body language, recognizing danger signs. Yet it didn't prepare him to confront the deeper, more insidious challenge, recognizing when those signs were merely shadows cast by his own prejudices. As he watched Jason quietly selecting a bunch of bananas, Kyle's mind churned. Was this man a threat? Was he just another law-abiding citizen? Or was Kyle's conditioned suspicion an invisible wall clouding his judgment? The doubt tugged at him, clashing with his desire to do right by the badge and his community. Kyle's internal conflict mirrored a larger reality faced by many new officers across the country, caught between the call to uphold justice and the unconscious biases ingrained through environment and upbringing. It was a difficult balancing act, made all the more precarious by the high stakes of law enforcement encounters. This tension soon escalated as Kyle's role transformed from a bystander to an active participant in a situation that would challenge everything he thought he knew. The encounter with Jason Reynolds was not just a test of professionalism, but a crucible revealing the cracks in the system and the human psyche alike. Kyle's story is a stark reminder Prejudice is not born in a vacuum. It is crafted in the schools we attend, the conversations we hear, the images we absorb, often without question. Understanding this is the first step toward breaking the cycle. As Kyle grappled with his fears and judgments, the stage was set for a confrontation that would expose not only the flaws of a young officer's mindset, but also the urgent need for systemic change. For in that moment of quiet suspicion, the true battle lines of justice, equality, and humanity were drawn. And so, as the market hummed with its everyday life beneath the surface, a storm was gathering, one that would soon demand courage, reflection, and ultimately transformation. The moment Jason Reynolds stepped toward the checkout line, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Kyle Matthews, standing nearby in his fresh uniform, spotted him instantly, the man who seemed to embody everything Kyle's training warned him about, yet also everything Kyle feared confronting within himself. Kyle's jaw tightened. His grip instinctively tightened on the radio clipped to his shoulder, a silent reassurance of authority he hadn't fully earned yet. He took a step forward, clearing his throat sharply to get Jason's attention. Sir Kyle began, his voice clipped. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" Jason turned his calm eyes, meeting Kyle's, with a steady, measured gaze. "Just shopping," Jason replied simply, his tone courteous but firm. There was no trace of aggression, only a quiet confidence born from years of experience. But Kyle's suspicion didn't waver. "Do you have ID? Any reason I should be questioning you?" His words, though masked in official language, carried an undercurrent of challenge, It was a tone Kyle didn't realize was escalating the situation, one that suggested distrust before any proof was offered. Jason's expression remained unchanged. "Officer, I'm a federal agent. Here's my badge." He reached inside his jacket, pulling out the worn leather wallet that held his credentials. "I'm here legally, just like any other citizen." Yet Kyle's gaze flickered with doubt. His training hadn't prepared him for this kind of confrontation, a face-to-face meeting, where authority clashed with experience, where uncertainty bred tension. Instead of easing, the situation thickened with unspoken assumptions and defensive postures. "Step aside, please," Kyle said abruptly, signaling for backup. His tone sharpened, tinged with frustration. "We need to verify your identity further." Jason's voice stayed calm, but his eyes held a quiet warning. "Officer, I'm not here to cause trouble. Let me show you my credentials properly, or you can call my office." The exchange, seemingly routine, was laced with deeper undercurrents. Kyle's lack of communication skills and his reliance on suspicion over dialogue fed into a cycle that could easily spiral into conflict. Jason, experienced and composed, recognized the danger and chose patience over provocation, hoping to diffuse the tension. Yet the store's atmosphere grew heavy as bystanders sensed the unease. Some glanced nervously. Others whispered behind cupped hands. The silent pressure mounted a powder keg, waiting for a spark. This encounter highlights a frequent and dangerous mistake when officers rely on intimidation and distrust instead of clear communication and respect. Situations can escalate needlessly. The failure to engage with empathy and to recognize the humanity of those they encounter undermines the very protection they aim to provide. Jason's steady demeanor contrasted sharply with Kyle's insecurity and aggression, illuminating a broader issue within law enforcement, the gap between experience and training and between calm authority and active suspicion. The story here isn't just about a single interaction. It's a mirror reflecting systemic failures. When new officers like Kyle lack the tools to manage complex human dynamics, every encounter risks becoming a flashpoint. And so as Jason and Kyle stood facing each other in that crowded aisle, the tension wasn't just between two men. It was a clash of worlds, a test of whether justice would be tempered with understanding or drowned in fear. This moment was a lesson. Writ large authority wielded without wisdom is a blade that cuts both sides, while experience guided by respect can bridge divides. As the conversation continued, all eyes were on them, waiting, hoping that reason and patience would prevail over fear and misunderstanding. The tension in Cedarwood Market had been quietly simmering, but in an instant, it exploded into chaos. Kyle Matthews, his pulse pounding louder than the bustling sounds around him, made a decision that would change everything. In the middle of the crowded supermarket aisle, with shoppers frozen in confusion and fear, Kyle drew his service weapon. The sharp metallic click echoed ominously against the hum of chatter and clinking carts. He pointed the gun directly at Jason Reynolds. "Don't move!" Kyle barked, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a thunderclap. His eyes, wide with a mixture of adrenaline and fear, locked onto Jason's steady gaze. Jason, unfazed, slowly raised his hands, palms open and visible. His voice remained calm but firm. "Officer Matthews, please let's talk this through. There's no need for this." Around them the market froze. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Elderly shoppers stepped back wide-eyed and silent. The sudden eruption of authority turned the familiar space into a battleground. Kyle's hand trembled slightly. His mind raced. Training flashed through his memory instincts, screaming to control the situation. But beneath that, a quieter voice urged caution, empathy, and reason. Yet overwhelmed by the swirl of doubt and pressure, he struggled to hear it. Jason's eyes met Kyle's, a silent plea threading through the tension. We're both here to serve and protect. But this isn't how it happens. The stark contrast was evident. Jason's composed demeanor, honed by years of high-stakes experience against Kyle's youthful inexperience and fear-fueled reaction. The scene highlighted how quickly power without control can spiral into tragedy. "Lower your weapon," Jason urged. "Gently. Look around. These people are scared. This is a community, not a war zone." For a heartbeat, Kyle hesitated. The grip on his gun loosened imperceptibly. The lesson was clear, and brutal emotions unchecked can turn protectors into threats. The ability to stay calm, to communicate, rather than intimidate, can mean the difference between life and death. Behind Kyle, the murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered for him to think. Others reached for their phones to record the tension mounting like a live wire. This moment stands as a powerful reminder: the human mind and heart must work together in moments of crisis. Training that focuses solely on force, without emotional intelligence, creates dangers for everyone involved. Jason's calm insistence, his measured words, were more than a plea. They were a lifeline cast in a sea of fear and misunderstanding. As Kyle slowly lowered his weapon, the atmosphere shifted from a potential disaster to a fragile moment of hope. The onlookers exhaled collectively, relief mingling with the sobering reality of how close they had come to catastrophe. This scene is a stark example of the critical importance of emotional regulation in law enforcement. It teaches that strength is not in the weapon, but in the restraint. That true courage lies in the willingness to listen, to understand, and to de-escalate before tragedy strikes. In the everyday spaces of our communities, such moments can save lives, mend trust, and preserve dignity. But it requires more than protocols. It demands humanity. The story of Kyle and Jason in Cedarwood Market is not just about an incident with a drawn weapon. It's a lesson etched into the collective conscience, a call for empathy and control amid authority's immense responsibility. And so, as the tension finally eased, the scene remained etched in the minds of all present, a vivid reminder that the difference between peace and violence often hinges on a single breath, a single choice. The air hung thick with tension, but Jason Reynolds knew exactly what to say. 5 words that would alter the course of this confrontation forever. His voice cut through the silence, calm yet commanding. "Call Chief Anderson now." Kyle Matthews froze the gun in his hand, momentarily still. The name, Chief Robert Anderson, struck a chord deep within him. A respected figure in the police department, known not only for his leadership, but for his commitment to fairness and justice, Anderson was a man whose presence could shift any situation. Jason's eyes locked with Kyle's, steady and unwavering. "You know who I'm talking about," he said. Quietly, "Call him now." For a moment, the youthful officer wrestled with his fear and pride. This wasn't just a name. It was a symbol of authority grounded in respect, not fear. The realization dawned on Kyle that this wasn't just about power on the street. It was about accountability, about the values the department claimed to uphold. The room seemed to hold its breath. Around them, the shoppers' tension slowly ebbed, replaced by curiosity and hope. Kyle's grip on the weapon loosened as he reached for his radio. His voice was shaky but resolute as he spoke. "Dispatch, call Chief Anderson to the supermarket immediately." Jason exhaled, the first sign of relief crossing his face. This simple act, invoking a trusted leader's name, had transformed a potentially tragic standoff into a moment ripe for dialogue. This exchange underscored an essential truth within the tangled web of law enforcement relationships, and reputations carry enormous weight. Personal connections like Jason's with Chief Anderson are not merely social ties. They serve as lifelines that can defuse danger and ensure justice is served properly. In systems burdened by historical mistrust and instances of misconduct, respect earned through integrity becomes a powerful tool. It can override suspicion, silence hostility, and remind those in uniform that they answer to higher standards than fear or prejudice. Jason's strategic invocation of Chief Anderson demonstrated how influence and trust in leadership are as crucial as any tactical training. It highlighted a key lesson for law enforcement agencies everywhere. Cultivating genuine accountability and mentorship is vital to changing behaviors on the ground. Kyle's moment of hesitation and subsequent action reflected his inner conflict. A young officer caught between inherited biases and the dawning understanding that law enforcement must be about protection, not intimidation. This episode also reminds us how individuals with strong ethical foundations can serve as anchors in stormy situations. The role of leaders like Chief Anderson transcends their rank. They embody the conscience of the force, offering guidance when decisions hang in the balance. For the community watching it was a glimmer of hope that justice and humanity could still prevail, even in the face of systemic challenges. As Kyle awaited the chief's arrival, the atmosphere subtly shifted. The tension gave way to an unspoken promise that this confrontation might end not with violence, but with understanding and accountability. Jason, meanwhile, kept his composure, aware that his calm and the mention of a respected name had bought precious time. Time that could mean safety for everyone involved. This moment also serves as a reminder of the importance of building bridges within law enforcement and between police and the public. Networks of trust and mutual respect are essential in transforming a system too often marred by fear and division. Moreover, it reveals how knowledge, knowing who holds influence, who stands for justice, can empower individuals to protect themselves and others in moments of crisis. Jason's experience is a case study in the power of connections and the role personal integrity plays in navigating dangerous situations. It's a testament to the impact one person's awareness and calm can have in changing the course of events. Ultimately, Call Chief Anderson now was more than just a command. It was a beacon of hope in a fraught encounter, a call for leadership to step in and uphold the principles that should govern every interaction between police and citizens. As Chief Anderson approached the supermarket ready to take charge, the story underscored a critical lesson for all in the face of fear and prejudice. The strength of character, trust, and leadership can light the way toward justice. This incident, witnessed by many, was not just about the immediate threat of violence, but about the potential for change. When those in power are held to account, a powerful reminder that true authority comes with responsibility. In the days that followed, this encounter would serve as a catalyst for conversations about police conduct, accountability, and the urgent need for systemic reform. It highlighted that behind every headline and viral video, there are individuals making decisions that can either perpetuate injustice or foster change. Jason's choice to invoke Chief Anderson's name was a masterclass in crisis management, underscoring how the power of relationships and respect can be a lifeline in moments when every second counts. For listeners, this story offers more than just drama. It offers a roadmap for courage, strategy, and hope in the struggle for fairness and dignity. It teaches us that sometimes a few words spoken with calm confidence can shift the tides of conflict and open a path toward resolution. And it reminds those who serve in uniform that their highest duty is not wielding power, but upholding trust, a trust that must be earned and never taken for granted. The distant hum of approaching sirens signaled the arrival of a new chapter in this tense story. Chief Robert Anderson pulled up in his unmarked car, his calm demeanor and steady gaze immediately setting a different tone. At 52 years old, Anderson carried decades of law enforcement experience, not just as a career, but as a personal mission to uphold justice and integrity. As he stepped out of the vehicle, the crowd's murmurs hushed. His presence commanded attention not through force, but through respect earned over years of principled leadership. Anderson's uniform was impeccable, but it was the resolve in his eyes and the measured calm in his step that told the real story. Jason Reynolds felt a surge of relief wash over him. This was more than a colleague or superior. This was a trusted friend who had walked with him through countless challenges and understood the weight of responsibility they both bore. Chief Anderson's approach was deliberate. He scanned the scene with an experienced eye, taking in the agitated officer, the bystanders frozen in disbelief, and Jason's composed yet firm posture. The contrast was stark. Here was the chaos of youthful impulsiveness. There was the steady hand of reason. Without hesitation, Anderson took command. His voice was clear, authoritative, but not harsh. "Officer Matthews, lower your weapon and step back," he ordered, cutting through the tension like a knife through fog. Kyle Matthews, still grappling with his own fears and doubts, obeyed, his hands trembling as he complied. Anderson then turned to Jason, nodding respectfully. "Thank you for keeping your composure," he said softly. "This situation could have ended very differently." Jason responded with a modest smile. "It's about protecting everyone here, including Officer Matthews." This exchange illuminated the essence of true leadership, not domination, but guidance, not fear, but trust. Chief Anderson's role in this story was crucial. He represented the possibility of change within a system too often marred by misconduct and mistrust. His commitment to fairness was not an abstract ideal, but a living practice that shaped his every decision. As he gathered the officers around him, Anderson's tone shifted to one of reflection and education. "Kyle," he said, addressing the young officer directly, "you are here to serve and protect all members of this community without prejudice. Fear and bias have no place in this badge." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Kyle's face, once hardened by suspicion, softened as he absorbed the weight of responsibility now laid bare before him. Anderson continued, addressing the entire team. "Our duty is to build bridges, not walls, to ensure safety through respect and understanding. Today, you all witnessed how quickly fear can escalate into danger. Let this be a lesson for all of us." This moment of candid conversation was more than a reprimand. It was a teaching moment born from experience and empathy. Anderson's leadership style exemplified how ethical guidance could transform not only individuals, but entire departments. As the scene began to calm, Anderson turned to Jason with a thoughtful look. "Your courage to speak up to remind us all of the higher standards we must uphold is commendable. We need more officers like you." Jason nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than a victory over a single incident. It was a reaffirmation of the values that should define law enforcement. The chief's presence also reassured the community gathered nearby. Seeing a leader willing to confront wrongdoing openly and fairly fostered a glimmer of hope in hearts often weighed down by skepticism. Anderson's swift and fair handling of the situation sent a clear message that justice is not merely about enforcing laws, but about upholding dignity and trust. This episode would echo far beyond the walls of that supermarket. It became a beacon illustrating how leadership rooted in ethics could diffuse conflicts, repair trust, and set a new standard for policing. For the officers involved, it was a call to self-reflection, a reminder that their badge carries not just authority, but accountability to the people they serve. For Jason and Kyle, it was the beginning of a new understanding that real strength lies in empathy and respect, not aggression or fear. Chief Anderson's arrival and decisive action underlined a profound lesson: leadership matters. It shapes culture, influences behavior, and ultimately determines whether a community feels protected or threatened. In a world where stories of abuse and injustice often dominate headlines, Anderson's example stood as a powerful counterpoint, proof that integrity at the top can inspire change at every level. The lesson resonated beyond policing, reminding all listeners that true leadership requires courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to justice. This moment also emphasized that change is possible even in entrenched systems when principled leaders choose to act boldly and fairly. As the day wound down and the crowd dispersed, Chief Anderson remained a steady presence, a guardian not only of law, but of conscience. His approach left a lasting imprint that no badge or uniform should ever be a shield for prejudice or violence. Instead, every officer must embody the oath they took to protect and serve with honor, fairness, and respect. And so this chapter closed not with despair, but with a promise that through responsible leadership, accountability, and the courage to confront hard truths, a better future for all is within reach. Listeners are reminded that leaders like Chief Anderson are essential beacons guiding us toward a society where justice prevails and every individual is treated with dignity. The story encourages reflection on our own roles, whether as citizens, officers, or community members, in fostering accountability and respect. Because at its core, this tale is about hope. Hope that through ethical leadership and shared responsibility, we can break cycles of fear and mistrust. Chief Anderson's arrival was not just the end of a crisis, but the beginning of a renewed commitment, a call to action for all who believe in justice and equality. And for those listening, it serves as a vital reminder. Leadership is not just about power. It is about standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. This story, told through the lens of one courageous encounter, invites us all to imagine and work toward a world where such moments are the norm, not the exception. Because when leaders lead with heart and integrity, they light the way for others to follow. And that light can dispel even the darkest shadows of prejudice and fear. The supermarket was filled with a mix of tension and uncertainty. A place that had once been ordinary, but was now the stage for a gripping encounter that none present would soon forget. Among the customers milling about, their eyes wide and breaths shallow emotions, collided fear, confusion, disbelief, and surprisingly, a fragile thread of hope. These bystanders, everyday people, suddenly found themselves caught in the middle of a moment that exposed the raw nerve of power and prejudice. Mariah, a cashier in her early 30s, stood behind her register frozen for a moment, as she watched the escalating scene between Officer Kyle Matthews and Jason Reynolds. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the busy pace of the store, but from the weight of what was unfolding. She had witnessed incidents before, frayed tempers, loud arguments, but never this. A uniformed officer pointing a gun at a fellow law enforcement agent, an elder, a man who carried the calm of experience in his eyes. "I've never been so scared in my life," Maria whispered later. It wasn't just about the gun. It was the tension, the uncertainty. We didn't know if it would explode into violence or if someone would get hurt. But then there was something else aglimmer, that maybe justice would win out. The customers around her felt the same swirling mix of emotions. There was Samuel, a father with his young daughter, clutching his hand tightly, his eyes darting nervously between the officers and the exit. And then Helen, an elderly woman, who quietly recorded the incident on her phone, understanding that this moment might be more important than any of them initially realized. Amid the fear and confusion, a collective sense of witnessing history began to emerge. People were no longer just bystanders. They became guardians of truth, holders of accountability, and voices for change. The smartphones held high the whispered prayers for safety. The subtle nods exchanged between strangers all converged into a communal act of bearing witness. This moment illustrated a vital lesson. Every person present, whether directly involved or not, played a crucial role in the pursuit of justice. Bystanders hold immense power. Their presence, their documentation, their willingness to speak out can shift the course of events. Jason, aware of this unseen support, maintained his composure. He understood the significance, not just of de-escalating the immediate threat, but of the broader message his actions conveyed. His calm demeanor, even in the face of danger, sent ripples of reassurance through the crowd. Kyle Matthews, meanwhile, was surrounded by an ocean of eyes that judged, questioned, and hoped for transformation. The stark contrast between fear and hope hung palpably in the air. This incident was not isolated. It mirrored countless stories where communities grappled with trust in law enforcement. But here in this small supermarket, the presence of a community ready to observe and stand alongside justice created a powerful buffer against unchecked authority. The eyes of the bystanders told a story of their own, of citizens yearning for safety without prejudice, for officers who protect, without fear for systems that serve with fairness. It was a testament to the collective strength found when people refuse to be silent in the face of injustice. Moreover, the community's role extended beyond mere observation. Their unity and shared sense of responsibility formed a foundation for accountability. By documenting the incident, sharing it widely, and demanding transparency, they became active participants in a process that could prevent future abuses. This shared witnessing illuminated the broader societal truth: justice is not delivered solely in courtrooms or by officials, but also through the eyes and voices of everyday people. It is the public's refusal to accept injustice quietly that fuels progress. Maria, Samuel, Helen, and countless others became unexpected heroes that day, reminding us all that courage comes in many forms, including the courage to watch, to listen, and to speak out. Their stories emphasize that we all hold a part of the solution. When communities unite to shine light on wrongdoing, they protect not only individuals, but the very fabric of justice. This episode at the supermarket serves as a compelling call to action. Be vigilant, be present, and be willing to stand for what is right. Because in the end, it is the collective will of people, ordinary citizens acting together, that creates lasting change. The bystanders' eyes were not just witnesses. They were a beacon of hope that in the face of fear and confusion, humanity's better nature can prevail. And in their silent, watchful presence, the future of justice found a steadfast ally. The buzz of the supermarket's fluorescent lights hummed quietly as shoppers moved along aisles, scanning shelves and pushing carts. Among them, Mia, a young cashier in her early 20s, stood just outside her register, her eyes flickering anxiously between the unfolding scene and the small screen of her smartphone. She had a front-row seat to a moment she knew was bigger than any usual disruption, a moment where justice itself seemed to hang in the balance. As Officer Kyle Matthews raised his weapon toward Jason Reynolds, tension rippled through the crowd. Mia's heart pounded not only for the immediate danger, but also for the larger battle that this confrontation symbolized. Without hesitation, she gripped her phone and started recording. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her resolve was firm. I knew I had to capture everything Mia would later say, her voice steady, but filled with emotion. Not just for Jason, but for all those who might face injustice without anyone to stand up for them. Technology had become a silent guardian in modern society, and in this instance, Mia wielded it as a shield against abuse of power. Her recording wasn't just pixels and sound. It was a testament, a witness that could not be ignored or erased by false narratives. Mia's video captured every detail. The harsh glare in Kyle's eyes, the steady calm in Jason's voice, the startled gasps and murmurs from bystanders, and most importantly, the moment when those 5 words echoed through the tense air, "Call Chief Anderson." Now, it was that phrase uttered by Jason that shifted the tide of authority and reminded all present that accountability was never far behind. This act of recording was more than just a spontaneous reaction. It highlighted a broader movement, a shift in how power is checked and balanced in the digital age. Video evidence has become one of the most powerful tools in exposing systemic racism and police misconduct. From the heartbreaking footage of George Floyd's final moments to countless other instances, these recordings have pierced through denial and compelled action. Experts emphasize that without such visual proof, many cases of injustice might have been buried, dismissed, or swept under the rug. The clarity and immediacy of video make it difficult for perpetrators to escape scrutiny, and it empowers victims to reclaim their narratives. Mia's recording did not just capture an incident. It became a catalyst for change. It was shared across social media platforms, quickly gaining traction. People across the country watched and reacted their outrage, sparking conversations, protests, and demands for reform. Yet this power comes with responsibility. Mia understood the weight of what she held in her hands. The act of recording, especially in moments of crisis, can be fraught with danger and ethical considerations. How one frames the narrative respects the dignity of those involved and balances privacy with the public's right to know is a complex challenge. But the undeniable truth remains: technology has transformed the landscape of social justice. The smartphone, once merely a device for connection and entertainment, now stands as a sentinel for truth. Mia's courage to document the unfolding injustice mirrors countless others who have stepped forward to record abuses, refusing to be passive observers. Their collective actions have brought about awareness, accountability, and in many cases, legal repercussions for those who misuse their authority. This phenomenon also shines a spotlight on the importance of digital literacy and activism. Understanding how to capture, share, and protect video evidence responsibly is becoming a vital skill in the fight against systemic racism. Moreover, these recordings often act as a bridge between communities, and law enforcement exposing not just individual wrongdoings, but systemic issues that require comprehensive reform. The visual proof can mobilize policymakers, law enforcement agencies, and the public to enact changes that words alone might not achieve. Mia's role, though small in the grand narrative, symbolizes the power of ordinary individuals equipped with modern technology to influence justice. It underscores a crucial lesson in an age where images travel faster than words. Capturing the truth is an act of courage and a step toward accountability. Her video became a beacon illuminating the path for those still struggling to have their voices heard. It reminded everyone watching that the fight against racial injustice requires vigilance, documentation, and above all, the courage to stand up, even if it is with a smartphone in hand. Through Mia's lens, the world witnessed a critical moment of confrontation, courage, and the beginning of accountability. It is a testament to how technology, when wielded by conscientious individuals, can safeguard justice in the face of fear and prejudice. The moment the video surfaced, it sent shockwaves throughout the police department and the wider community. The raw footage captured by Mia made it impossible to ignore what had happened inside that supermarket. An officer pointing a gun at a man who was not only a fellow law enforcement agent, but also a respected member of the community. Within hours, the department's Internal Affairs Division was mobilized. The usually quiet offices buzzed with activity as investigators gathered around screens, replaying the footage frame by frame, scrutinizing every gesture, every word, every heartbeat captured in the tense encounter. Detective Laura Simmons, a seasoned internal affairs investigator, known for her unwavering commitment to justice, was assigned to lead the probe. As she settled into the case, Laura understood the high stakes a police officer's conduct under scrutiny, public trust at risk, and the broader implications for the community's faith in their protectors. Her team started by gathering witness statements. Mia's testimony was first, and her detailed account of the incident was crucial. I was scared, but I knew I had to record everything Mia recounted. Her voice steady, despite the lingering shock. Her video was corroborated by other shoppers and supermarket employees who described the scene as chaotic, but underscored Jason's calm demeanor throughout. Laura also interviewed Officer Kyle Matthews, who initially claimed he feared for his life. Yet the video revealed nuances that contradicted some of his statements, moments where his posture suggested aggression rather than defense. The internal affairs investigation was not just about assigning blame, but uncovering the systemic failures that allowed such a situation to escalate. The question on everyone's mind was, how did a young officer with clear prejudices and poor training end up threatening a fellow officer with a gun in broad daylight? Behind the scenes, the legal framework governing police conduct was carefully examined. The team reviewed training records, use of force policies, and previous complaints against Kyle. It became evident that gaps in training and oversight had contributed to his aggressive behavior. One of the toughest challenges was navigating the culture of silence that sometimes exists within police departments. Officers often protect their own, making investigations difficult. But the clear video evidence and public pressure made this case different. The community demanded transparency, and the department's leadership was under scrutiny from both citizens and media. Detective Simmons faced moments of tension as she pushed for full disclosure. Some colleagues resisted, fearing reputational damage, but her resolve was firm. Accountability isn't just a word she said in a meeting. It's the cornerstone of trust between law enforcement and the people they serve. As days turned into weeks, the investigation deepened. Forensic experts analyzed the footage to reconstruct the exact sequence of events. Psychologists evaluated Kyle's behavior to understand the root of his aggression. Meanwhile, meetings with community leaders aimed to maintain open communication and rebuild trust. The process revealed uncomfortable truths. Kyle's implicit biases, exacerbated by inadequate training and poor supervision, had led to a dangerous overreaction. His fear was not of Jason as a person, but a product of ingrained prejudices against people of color. The investigation also exposed systemic weaknesses. Protocols for de-escalation were either poorly taught or ignored, and the mechanisms to identify officers at risk of misconduct were lacking. Despite these revelations, the department made a public commitment to reform. Chief Anderson held a press conference, pledging full cooperation with internal affairs and promising changes to training and oversight. "We must learn from this incident to ensure it never happens again," he declared, his voice firm but empathetic. The community's response was cautiously optimistic. Many appreciated the transparency and the steps taken, but there was an undercurrent of skepticism born from years of unaddressed grievances. For Detective Simmons, the investigation was a defining moment in her career. It reaffirmed her belief that policing must be rooted in justice and accountability, not unchecked power. She hoped that by shedding light on this incident, the department could begin to heal and rebuild its relationship with the community. This internal affairs investigation became a case study in how modern police departments confront internal failures. It underscored the essential role of oversight bodies in maintaining ethical standards and protecting citizens' rights. From this moment forward, the story of Kyle Matthews would serve as a warning and a catalyst for change. It reminded everyone that no one is above the law and that true justice requires constant vigilance, transparency, and courage to confront uncomfortable truths. The department's efforts to hold Kyle accountable sent a message to all officers: authority comes with responsibility, and misuse of power will not be tolerated. As the investigation unfolded, it also highlighted the critical role of community involvement. Without Mia's video, and the witnesses willing to speak out, the truth might have remained hidden. It was a powerful testament to the idea that justice is not the sole responsibility of law enforcement, but a collective mission shared by all. This episode became more than just an internal probe. It was a turning point in the fight against systemic racism within policing, illustrating how accountability and transparency are the foundations of rebuilding trust in law enforcement. Ultimately, the internal affairs investigation revealed that reform begins not with punishment alone, but with honest reflection, commitment to change, and the unwavering support of the community. This was the path forward, one that demanded courage, empathy, and a steadfast dedication to justice for all. The video had barely gone viral before the media frenzy began. What started as a local incident in a small supermarket in Cedar Falls quickly exploded into a national conversation. News outlets from coast to coast picked up the story, broadcasting the footage of Officer Kyle Matthews pointing his gun at FBI agent Jason Bennett. The image was stark raw and unignorable, a chilling reminder of the racial tensions that simmer beneath the surface of American law enforcement. From the first headline breaking early that morning, journalists scrambled to piece together the full story. Reporters interviewed witnesses, including Mia, the brave young employee who had captured the moment on her phone. Her account gave the story a personal touch that made it relatable and deeply emotional for viewers. The media framed the event not just as a simple dispute between officers, but as a symbol of systemic issues within policing and racial profiling. Social media platforms exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForJason and #EndRacistCops, which spread like wildfire. Millions shared the video-joined conversations and demanded accountability. Influencers, activists, and ordinary citizens used these platforms to discuss police reform, racial bias, and the urgent need for transparency. The public's reaction was intense and polarized. Many expressed outrage and fear, recalling other recent cases of police misconduct that had ended tragically. For those who had experienced similar encounters, the incident felt all too familiar, a painful validation of long-standing mistrust toward law enforcement. At the same time, some voices called for patience and due process, warning against rushing to judgment before the facts were fully known. But even these voices acknowledged that the footage brought uncomfortable truths to light, truths that could no longer be swept under the rug. News programs aired expert panels discussing the broader implications. Former law enforcement officers, civil rights attorneys, and sociologists analyzed the behavior displayed by Officer Matthews. They highlighted how implicit biases, poor training, and institutional culture create environments where such incidents can happen. The story also sparked debate about the use of body cameras and the importance of video evidence. Experts emphasized how technology is transforming policing by providing objective documentation that can protect both officers and civilians. Mainstream media coverage pressed the Cedar Falls Police Department to respond publicly. Chief Robert Anderson held multiple press conferences addressing the incident with transparency and a commitment to reform. He pledged cooperation with the internal affairs investigation and announced plans to review training procedures and officer conduct policies. The coverage didn't just stay within the news cycle. It inspired rallies and town hall meetings across the country. Community leaders called for systemic changes, while families affected by police violence shared their stories, creating a mosaic of voices united for justice. The media spotlight also influenced local government officials. City councils convened emergency sessions to discuss measures to restore public trust. Proposals ranged from enhanced cultural competency training to independent oversight committees. Throughout this media storm, Jason Bennett, though initially reluctant, found himself thrust into the public eye. Interviews with him humanized the situation. Here was a man committed to justice, an experienced agent who confronted fear and prejudice without losing his composure. Meanwhile, Officer Kyle Matthews faced mounting scrutiny. His past records were examined, revealing a history of complaints that had been overlooked. The media coverage exposed the systemic failures that allowed someone with known issues to remain on the force. This incident became a catalyst not only for local reform, but for a nationwide reckoning with policing practices. It was a vivid illustration of how a single event caught on camera can mobilize a movement. For many viewers, the story was a call to action. It underscored the critical role media plays in shining a light on injustice and holding institutions accountable. It showed how public pressure, fueled by informed reporting, and social media activism can compel change. However, the media also bore a heavy responsibility. The way stories are framed influences public perception and policy. Balanced, accurate, and empathetic storytelling was essential to avoid further polarizing communities. The coverage also sparked important conversations about mental health support for officers and civilians alike. Experts discussed how stress trauma and racial bias can intersect, necessitating comprehensive approaches to law enforcement reform. Ultimately, the media spotlight transformed the incident from a distressing local event into a national symbol for the fight against systemic racism in policing. It demonstrated the power of journalism and citizen engagement in promoting justice and equity. The news of the incident at Cedar Falls did not just stay within the borders of the city. It resonated far beyond, stirring hearts and minds across the nation. In the days following the confrontation between Officer Kyle Matthews and FBI agent Jason Bennett, a wave of community response erupted in Cedarwood, a city that until then had been quietly going about its daily life. The community's reaction was a powerful testament to how collective action can emerge from shared outrage and a thirst for justice. As the sun rose over Cedarwood city streets that once buzzed with mundane routines became venues for peaceful protests and heartfelt gatherings. People of all ages, races, and backgrounds came together united by a single purpose: to stand against the injustice witnessed so vividly in that supermarket aisle. The sight was both inspiring and deeply moving. Young students, parents with their children, activists with banners, and elders sharing stories, all marched side by side, their voices joining into a chorus, demanding accountability. The peaceful protests began at the city's central square, with hundreds gathering to listen to speeches from community leaders and activists. Among them was Reverend Marcus Harris, a respected voice for social justice, who reminded everyone of the long history of struggle against racial discrimination in America. His words were a call to both remembrance and action, linking past movements to the current fight. "We are not just protesting for Jason," he said passionately, "but for every person who has ever been judged not by their character but by the color of their skin." Alongside the spiritual leaders, local civil rights organizations played a pivotal role in organizing the community's response. Groups like Cedarwood United for Equality mobilized volunteers, coordinated logistics for protests, and provided resources for those affected. They offered legal aid clinics for residents concerned about police misconduct and hosted forums where people could share their experiences and strategies for peaceful activism. One of the most remarkable aspects of the community response was the inclusive nature of the movement. White neighbors, Latino families, Asian Americans, and African Americans alike stood shoulder to shoulder, recognizing that the fight against racism is not just the burden of one group, but a shared responsibility. Local businesses joined in, some closing early to allow employees to attend rallies, others donating supplies like water, snacks, and first aid kits for protesters. The media covered these demonstrations extensively, highlighting the calm dignity and determination that defined Cedarwood's public outcry. Interviews with participants revealed personal stories of why the issue mattered deeply to them. For many, the incident was a painful mirror reflecting their own encounters with systemic bias. For others, it was an awakening to realities they had not fully grasped before. Social media further amplified the movement's reach as videos and images from the protests flooded platforms, inspiring similar demonstrations in neighboring cities and even states afar. Hashtags such as #Stand with Cedarwood and #Justice for Jason became rallying points for online solidarity, showing that while physical distance separated people, the fight for justice connected them. However, the journey was not without challenges. There were tensions within the community. Some residents worried about the economic impact of protests. Others feared escalation into violence, and a few expressed skepticism about whether real change was possible. Leaders worked tirelessly to address these concerns, emphasizing the importance of peaceful demonstration and dialogue. Amid the energy of marches and speeches, the community also focused on support systems for those most directly affected. Jason Bennett and his family received an outpouring of love and solidarity, with neighbors organizing meal trains and fundraising events to assist with legal expenses. Local mental health professionals volunteered time for counseling sessions, recognizing the emotional toll that such a public ordeal could inflict. Beyond immediate support, the protests sparked meaningful conversations in schools, churches, and workplaces about race privilege and justice. Workshops and panels were organized to educate and engage citizens on the complex dynamics that lead to incidents like the one in the supermarket. These educational efforts aimed to build a foundation for long-term change by shifting perspectives and dismantling prejudices. Importantly, the community's actions caught the attention of city officials. Mayor Elizabeth Reed publicly praised the peaceful demonstrations and pledged to work closely with law enforcement to implement reforms. She announced plans for a community advisory board to foster ongoing dialogue between residents and the police department, aiming to rebuild trust that had been fractured. The protests also became a catalyst for policy discussions at the state level. Lawmakers introduced bills focused on police accountability bias training and transparency. These legislative efforts, while still in their early stages, reflected the growing political will to address systemic problems highlighted by the incident. Throughout this movement, the sense of hope intertwined with grief and frustration. The people of Cedarwood were not naive. They understood the deep-rooted nature of racial injustice, yet their collective action embodied a powerful truth change begins when communities refuse to remain silent. In the end, the community's response to the incident was a profound demonstration of solidarity and resilience. It underscored the idea that fighting injustice requires more than individual courage. It demands a united front, a shared voice, and an unwavering commitment to stand up together. The dawn broke gently over Cedarwood, casting a soft golden light on a city poised at the edge of change. In a modest office downtown, Jason Bennett sat across from Sarah Collins, a seasoned civil rights attorney whose reputation for fearlessly challenging systemic injustice preceded her. Sarah's presence was a beacon of hope, a sign that Jason's fight was no longer his, alone. It was now a battle that carried the weight of a community's demand for justice and the promise of systemic accountability. Sarah Collins, in her early 40s, carried the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through the trenches of countless legal battles. Her eyes, sharp yet compassionate, revealed a mind always at work, piecing together puzzles others might overlook. From her first meeting with Jason, it was clear she was not just a lawyer, but a strategist deeply committed to the cause. Her initial words to Jason were both reassuring and galvanizing. "We're going to make sure your voice is heard and your story changes more than just your life." The legal journey ahead was daunting. Sarah explained in detail the multifaceted approach they would take. "This isn't just about the incident at the supermarket," she said. "It's about confronting the underlying patterns that allowed it to happen. We will gather evidence, witness testimonies, and expert opinions. We will challenge the police department's internal practices and the broader culture that protects misconduct." The first phase was meticulous and exhaustive. Sarah and her team began by reviewing every shred of available evidence. They secured the crucial video footage recorded by Mia, the supermarket employee, whose calm presence had preserved the truth in digital form. They reached out to other bystanders who had witnessed the incident, collecting their accounts to build a comprehensive narrative. Each testimony painted a vivid picture of what had transpired, a moment of fear, a spark of injustice, and the cold tension of authority misused. Sarah also called upon experts in law enforcement training and racial bias to prepare reports that would contextualize Kyle Matthews' actions. These specialists provided insight into the dangers of inadequate police training and the perpetuation of stereotypes that often escalate situations unnecessarily. Their analyses underscored how implicit biases could turn routine encounters into life-threatening confrontations, particularly for people of color. Jason found himself immersed in a whirlwind of interviews and legal preparations. The process was both exhausting and empowering. He recounted the moments he relived over and over in meetings, how Kyle's sudden drawing of a weapon in a crowded aisle had shattered a routine shopping trip. The emotional toll was immense, but Sarah's steady support helped channel his frustration into resolve. One evening, as Jason prepared for another day of depositions, Sarah sat beside him and shared a critical lesson from her experience. "This fight is a marathon, not a sprint," she said. "There will be setbacks and obstacles, but every step forward chips away at injustice. The law can be slow, but it can be relentless when wielded with precision." A critical challenge ahead was the inevitable pushback from the police department and city officials. The defense was expected to discredit witnesses, downplay the evidence, and argue that Kyle Matthews acted within his rights. Sarah prepared Jason for this reality, emphasizing the importance of maintaining composure and clarity. "Your story is your strength," she reminded him. "Stay honest and focused. The truth has a power that no amount of denial can erase." Behind the scenes, Sarah also engaged with community leaders and advocacy groups, coordinating efforts to keep public attention on the case. They recognized that legal battles do not happen in a vacuum. Public awareness and pressure could tip the scales, encouraging accountability beyond the courtroom. Sarah's strategic mind also identified opportunities for systemic change. She began drafting proposals for police reform measures, aiming to influence legislation that would mandate better training, stronger oversight, and clearer accountability mechanisms within the Cedarwood Police Department. "Our goal is not just compensation or punishment," she said, "but prevention. So no family has to endure what Jason's family has." As the days turned into weeks, the legal battle took shape. The media followed the case closely, spotlighting Sarah's efforts and Jason's courage. Community rallies continued, synchronized with key court dates, symbolizing the unity between the legal fight and public advocacy. For Jason, each court hearing was a test of resilience. His calm demeanor, forged by years of discipline and faith in justice, often contrasted sharply with the tense atmosphere inside the courtroom. Sarah's legal expertise was evident in her meticulous cross-examinations and compelling arguments, slowly dismantling the defense's attempts to obscure the truth. One poignant moment came when Sarah called Mia to testify. Her clear, composed recounting of the event added undeniable weight to the case. The video footage she recorded played on a large screen, its unflinching portrayal of reality stirring both jurors and spectators. It was a powerful reminder of how technology and brave individuals could illuminate truths long hidden in shadows. Through all this, Jason found strength not only in Sarah's support, but in the solidarity of Cedarwood citizens. Letters of encouragement, community fundraising, and public forums reaffirmed his belief that justice was attainable when people refused to stay silent. As the legal battle advanced, the stakes grew higher, but so did the hope. The journey was far from over, but the foundations for change had been firmly laid. Sarah Collins and Jason Bennett stood as symbols of perseverance, reminding everyone that the path to justice demands courage, unity, and unwavering commitment. The days following the supermarket incident were some of the most turbulent in Officer Kyle Matthews' young career. At just 26 years old, Kyle found himself trapped in a whirlwind of scrutiny, both from the public eye and the heavy weight of his own conscience. Beneath the bravado he showed in uniform, a deep conflict was beginning to stir, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about justice, authority, and himself. Kyle had grown up in a small, tight-knit town where stereotypes and fear often shaped perceptions more than facts did. From an early age, he was conditioned to see the world through a narrow lens, a lens that painted certain people as threats before they ever opened their mouths. Joining the police force was for Kyle a way to protect his community, a role he embraced with pride and seriousness. Yet that pride was now clashing violently with the reality of what had transpired at the supermarket. The incident had been captured on multiple phones and quickly shared online, a digital spotlight shining unflinchingly on Kyle's actions. Every replay of the video tore at the fabric of his self-image. He saw not a hero, but a man who had let fear and prejudice override judgment. The cold barrel of his drawn weapon aimed at Jason Bennett, a respected FBI agent, was a stark symbol of a deeper problem. A problem Kyle could no longer ignore. In the solitude of his small apartment, Kyle wrestled with a storm of emotions: shame, fear, confusion, and an aching desire for redemption. The faces of the supermarket patrons, the shocked expressions of his fellow officers, and most hauntingly, Jason's calm yet firm demeanor. These memories haunted his waking hours. He kept asking himself, how did it come to this? Where did I go wrong? His internal battle was compounded by the pressure from outside forces. The police department was under intense media scrutiny, with demands for accountability growing louder each day. Some colleagues turned cold shoulders, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truths the incident exposed. At the same time, community activists and civil rights groups called for sweeping reforms, placing Kyle at the epicenter of a societal reckoning. During these weeks, Kyle found an unlikely source of guidance in his mentor, Sergeant Mark Reynolds. Mark was a veteran officer who had witnessed the evolution of policing firsthand, understanding both its noble aims and its potential for harm when unchecked. One evening after a tense shift, Mark invited Kyle for a candid conversation. "Son," Mark began, "gently what you did. What happened, it's serious. But it's not the end of your story. The real test is what you do next. You've got a choice. Keep defending a mistake, or face it head-on and grow from it." Kyle listened, the weight of those words sinking in. "I don't know if I can," he admitted, voice cracking. "I've been taught to act fast, to trust my gut. But I see now that my gut was poisoned by fear. I don't want to be that guy anymore." Mark nodded. "It takes courage to admit that. Remember, nobody's perfect. But the system needs officers like you, who can change, who can learn, and lead by example." Encouraged by Mark's words, Kyle began the painful process of self-reflection. He reached out to community leaders and attended workshops on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques. He immersed himself in understanding how systemic racism influenced policing and society at large. Each step was a piece of his transformation, gradually dismantling old beliefs and rebuilding a new framework grounded in empathy and respect. The most profound moment came when Kyle requested to meet Jason Bennett. Their conversation was raw and honest. Jason shared his experiences not as an adversary, but as a man seeking understanding and change. "Officer Matthews," Jason said quietly, "I know fear can cloud judgment, but we have a choice to let fear rule us or to rise above it. I'm willing to believe you want to be better. That's the first step." Kyle felt a mix of relief and responsibility. That meeting was a turning point, marking the beginning of his commitment to not only reform his own actions, but to advocate for change within the department. This internal journey was neither simple nor swift. Kyle faced skepticism and resistance, both from within and outside the force. But his evolving awareness planted seeds of change, not just in himself, but as a ripple that others could see and be inspired by. The lesson was clear and vital. True transformation arises not from denial or defensiveness, but from courageously confronting uncomfortable truths. When individuals like Kyle are supported to face their mistakes, honestly, change becomes possible. It is this willingness to grow and adapt that holds the promise of a more just and compassionate society. Kyle Matthews' story reminds us all. Change begins within. And sometimes the hardest battles are fought not in public squares, but in the quiet chambers of the heart and mind. Jason Bennett's recovery was a journey marked by resilience, reflection, and the quiet power of support. The incident at Cedarwood supermarket had left more than just physical scars. It had cut deep into his sense of safety and trust. Now, in the aftermath, Jason faced the challenging path toward healing, a process that demanded courage not just on the battlefield, but within his own mind and heart. In the days following the encounter, Jason found himself grappling with intense emotions, frustration, anger, and an undercurrent of fear that lingered long after the chaos had settled. Though his body bore only minor bruises and scratches, the psychological impact was profound. Nightmares haunted his sleep, replaying the moment when the barrel of a gun was pressed against him. The familiar routines of daily life suddenly felt precarious, each public space a reminder of vulnerability. Jason's wife Melissa stood steadfastly by his side, becoming both a pillar of strength and a gentle guide through the storm. "We will get through this," she assured him on one particularly difficult evening, holding his hand as he battled waves of anxiety. Her unwavering presence reminded Jason that recovery was not a solitary endeavor, but a shared journey. Recognizing the depth of his emotional wounds, Jason sought professional help. Therapy became a vital lifeline, a safe space where he could unravel the tangled threads of trauma without judgment. His therapist, Dr. Elena Morales, specialized in trauma recovery for veterans and first responders. Through their sessions, Jason learned to identify triggers, develop coping mechanisms, and slowly reclaim his sense of agency. Trauma often rewires the brain, Dr. Morales explained during one session. But healing is about rewiring it again, creating new pathways of safety and trust. It's a process, not a destination. Jason embraced this perspective, dedicating himself to the hard work of therapy. Each breakthrough, whether it was managing a panic attack or confronting painful memories, felt like a small victory. He practiced mindfulness grounding techniques and gradually reintroduced himself to social situations that once felt daunting. Meanwhile, physical recovery intertwined with the emotional. The minor injuries he sustained were treated promptly, but Jason paid close attention to his overall health. Regular exercise, a balanced diet, and restorative sleep formed the foundation of his healing regimen. He understood that a healthy body was essential to supporting a healthy mind. As weeks turned to months, Jason noticed subtle shifts. The sharp edge of fear dulled, replaced by a cautious optimism. He began to volunteer with local organizations focused on community safety and police reform, channeling his experience into advocacy. This newfound purpose reinforced his healing, transforming pain into meaningful action. Yet Jason's journey was not without setbacks. Some days, the weight of what had happened threatened to overwhelm him. The support of his family therapist and friends was crucial during these times. Melissa's encouragement in particular helped him face the darker moments with renewed strength. "You're not alone," she reminded him, "and your story matters." Jason's healing underscored a vital lesson. Physical survival is only part of recovery. Mental health, often invisible, requires equal attention and compassion. For victims of trauma, especially those caught in the crossfire of power and prejudice, acknowledging this is essential. Through his journey, Jason Bennett emerged not just as a survivor, but as a testament to the human capacity for resilience. His story illuminated the importance of holistic care, where emotional, psychological, and physical health are nurtured together. In a world where acts of injustice often leave deep wounds, Jason's path offers hope. Healing is possible, but it demands patience, support, and the courage to confront pain honestly. It reminds us that beneath every headline and viral video, there are real lives, real struggles, and real triumphs waiting to be understood and honored. Chief Robert Anderson stood at the helm of Cedarwood's police department with a weight of responsibility heavier than ever before. The incident at the supermarket had sent ripples through the community, and now, as the highest-ranking officer, he understood that action was imperative. It was no longer just about damage control. It was about fundamentally changing the culture that had allowed such a moment to unfold. Anderson's office, usually a place of quiet administrative work, had become the strategic nerve center for reform. His commitment to policy change was clear and unwavering. Sitting behind his desk, he reviewed the extensive report compiled by internal affairs and external consultants. The findings painted a troubling picture. Implicit biases ran deep. Training was outdated, and communication skills among officers were insufficient to de-escalate volatile situations. He knew that the task ahead would be daunting, but Chief Anderson had long believed that leadership meant facing tough truths and making difficult decisions for the greater good. One crisp morning, he convened a meeting with his senior officers, trainers, and community representatives. The air in the room was thick with anticipation as he laid out a bold plan. "We must rebuild trust, not just with words, but with deeds." Anderson began, his voice steady, yet passionate. "This starts with comprehensive reform. We need to overhaul our training programs to include cultural competency, emotional intelligence, and conflict resolution." The proposal included mandatory workshops on diversity awareness, designed to challenge preconceived notions and foster empathy among officers. Role-playing scenarios would simulate real-world encounters, emphasizing de-escalation techniques over force. The department would also implement regular psychological evaluations to ensure officers' mental well-being, recognizing that stress and trauma could exacerbate poor judgment. Accountability will be non-negotiable, Anderson emphasized. There will be clear consequences for misconduct, and transparency in investigations will be our standard. We owe that to the people we serve. Among the community leaders present was Mrs. Helen Grant, a longtime advocate for social justice in Cedarwood. She nodded thoughtfully, expressing cautious optimism. "These changes are long overdue," she said, "but commitment must translate into action. We'll be watching closely." Anderson welcomed the scrutiny, understanding that public oversight was a crucial component of genuine reform. Beyond training, the chief proposed structural changes in department oversight. A civilian review board with subpoena power would be established, ensuring that complaints were handled impartially. Furthermore, Community policing initiatives would be expanded to foster closer relationships between officers and residents, breaking down barriers of mistrust. As the weeks passed, the department began rolling out the new programs. Officers like Kyle Matthews, whose actions had sparked outrage, were enrolled in specialized training aimed at reshaping their approach to policing. For Kyle, the process was humbling, a reckoning with his own biases, and a chance for redemption. Chief Anderson made it clear to the media that these reforms were not just a response to a crisis, but a commitment to a better future. Our goal is to create a police force that protects and serves all citizens equally, with respect and dignity, he declared at a press conference. We must learn from our failures and be courageous enough to change. The chief's vision resonated with many in the community, sparking a broader dialogue about policing practices nationwide. Yet the road ahead remained challenging. Resistance from within the force budget constraints and deeply ingrained cultural issues threatened to slow progress. Still, Anderson remained steadfast. He regularly met with activists, held town hall meetings, and personally mentored officers willing to embrace change. His leadership exemplified the principle that true reform starts at the top, with leaders willing to lead by example and confront uncomfortable realities. The policy overhaul at Cedarwood became a case study in transformative justice. It demonstrated that systemic issues required systemic solutions. Training, accountability, community engagement, and transparent governance woven together to build a foundation of trust. For Jason Bennett and the citizens of Cedarwood, these reforms offered a glimmer of hope, a sign that the painful lessons of that day might finally usher in lasting change. The chief's commitment illuminated a path forward, reminding all that while no system is perfect, the pursuit of justice demands continuous effort, courage, and compassion. The story of Jason Bennett and his confrontation with Officer Kyle Matthews in that Cedarwood supermarket had become more than just a local incident. It had ignited a spark that spread far beyond the town's borders, resonating with people across the nation. Jason's experience, caught on video and shared relentlessly on social media, became a symbol, a powerful testimony of the ongoing struggle against systemic racism and police misconduct in America. News outlets from New York to California picked up the story, framing it within a broader context of racial injustice. Editorials discussed not only Jason's courage, but also the deep-rooted issues that allowed such an incident to occur. Public figures, activists, and ordinary citizens joined the conversation, adding their voices to the call for accountability and reform. At rallies and protests in cities large and small, signs bearing Jason's image and the words "Justice for Jason" were raised high. These demonstrations echoed the messages of the Black Lives Matter movement and other civil rights organizations, linking this one personal story to a collective demand for change. Behind the scenes, Jason found himself unexpectedly thrust into a role he had never sought. Invitations to speak at forums, universities, and community events poured in. With a steady voice, he recounted his experience, emphasizing not only the injustice he faced, but also the possibility of change through courage and solidarity. During one such event in Washington, D.C., Jason stood before a diverse audience, his words carrying the weight of lived experience. "This is not just about me," he said firmly. "It's about all of us who've been marginalized, whose voices have been ignored, and whose lives have been threatened by prejudice disguised as law enforcement." His story became a bridge connecting disparate communities and sparking dialogues that had long been overdue. Grassroots organizations used Jason's narrative to educate others about the dangers of implicit bias, the importance of body cameras, and the urgent need for police reform. Policymakers took notice as well. Senators and representatives referenced Jason's case in debates, pushing for legislation that would mandate improved police training, establish clearer standards for use of force, and create independent review boards with real authority. In schools, teachers incorporated his story into lessons about civil rights and social justice, encouraging students to understand the human impact behind the headlines. Workshops were held, where participants shared their own encounters with discrimination, building empathy and understanding. The media spotlight also brought attention to the role of technology in social justice. Jason's calm, measured demeanor on camera contrasted sharply with the aggression displayed by Officer Matthews, illustrating how video evidence could hold power to disrupt false narratives and challenge abuses of authority. However, the national attention was not without challenges. Jason and his family faced scrutiny and threats from those who opposed the movement. Yet their resolve remained unshaken, fueled by a growing network of support and a shared belief in the possibility of a fairer society. As the movement gained momentum, Jason reflected on the broader significance of his experience. "Every story, like mine," he said, in a heartfelt interview, "adds a thread to the fabric of change. We're stronger together, and every voice counts." This chapter of Jason's journey revealed an essential truth. Individual experiences, when shared and amplified, can become powerful catalysts for social transformation. His story was no longer just about an isolated encounter. It had become a rallying cry for justice, equality, and respect for human dignity. In the quiet moments, Jason often thought about the future, about the generations to come, who deserve to live without fear of discrimination or violence. He understood that the road ahead was long, but every step taken by people united in purpose could lead to a world where stories like his would become relics of the past. The national movement inspired by Jason's courage was a testament to the enduring power of personal truth in the face of systemic oppression. It showed that change was not only necessary, but achievable, and that ordinary people could wield extraordinary influence when they dared to stand up, speak out, and demand justice. Through this collective awakening, the seeds of hope were planted deeply across the country, and from these seeds, a future of equality and fairness could grow, nurtured by the shared commitment to never let another story like Jason's be silenced or forgotten. In the quiet aftermath of the storm that had engulfed Cedarwood, a profound realization began to take shape not only within the community, but also among those who had witnessed the events unfold. Jason Bennett's story, while deeply personal and painful, highlighted a larger truth about the transformative power of empathy and education in dismantling the structures of prejudice that had long persisted in law enforcement and society at large. It became clear that beyond policy reforms and legal battles, the heart of the issue lay in the attitudes and beliefs carried within individuals, beliefs often passed down through generations, unchallenged and unexamined. Kyle Matthews, the young officer who had pointed a gun at Jason, represented more than just a single actor in a flawed system. He was a product of his environment, shaped by biases ingrained since childhood. Communities and police departments across the country began to see the urgent need for comprehensive education programs focused not only on the technical aspects of law enforcement, but also on cultural sensitivity and the development of emotional intelligence. Training sessions were redesigned to include immersive workshops where officers experienced simulations aimed at understanding the lived realities of marginalized communities. One such training involved role-playing scenarios where officers had to navigate interactions with people of diverse backgrounds, learning to listen actively, recognize unconscious biases, and respond with compassion rather than suspicion. These exercises were challenging, often uncomfortable, but undeniably necessary for fostering a genuine change in mindset. Jason himself became a vocal advocate for these educational initiatives. In interviews and public speaking events, he emphasized that true progress required more than just policies. It demanded an honest reckoning with the prejudices that lurked beneath the surface. "You can't fix what you don't acknowledge," he said, his voice steady but passionate. Education is the first step toward empathy, and empathy is the bridge to justice. Schools, too, began incorporating curricula that encourage students to engage critically with issues of race, privilege, and justice. Community centers hosted dialogues where residents shared their stories, creating spaces where empathy could flourish and misunderstandings be dismantled. Through storytelling and open conversation, barriers were broken down and hearts were opened. In Cedarwood, the police department initiated partnerships with local organizations dedicated to social justice and racial equity. Officers like Kyle Matthews were required to participate in ongoing mentorship programs, guided by community leaders and experts who challenged them to reflect on their actions and grow beyond their mistakes. Kyle's own transformation became a beacon of hope. Once defensive and fearful, he gradually embraced a path of accountability and learning. In a heartfelt conversation with Jason, he admitted, "I didn't realize how much my fears and assumptions were blinding me. Meeting you, seeing how calm and strong you were, it shook me to the core." Jason responded with quiet understanding. "It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to change." The ripple effect of such individual awakenings spread through the ranks of law enforcement slowly but surely, fostering a culture that valued respect over suspicion, dialogue over aggression. This shift was not instantaneous, nor was it without setbacks. But the seeds of empathy were planted deeply, promising a more just future. At a national conference on policing and community relations, Jason spoke to an audience of officers, educators, activists, and policymakers. "Empathy is not weakness," he reminded them. "It's the strength that holds us accountable to each other, that reminds us why justice matters. When we educate ourselves to see beyond skin color, we pave the way for real change." His words echoed far beyond the walls of the conference hall, inspiring new initiatives and renewed commitments to confronting racial biases wherever they existed. This chapter of the story, focused on empathy and education, underscored a vital lesson. Systemic change begins with personal transformation. It reminded everyone listening that beneath uniforms and titles, we are all human beings capable of growth, understanding, and compassion. In the end, the journey of Jason Bennett and Kyle Matthews was a testament to the power of empathy, how it can break down walls built by ignorance, heal wounds inflicted by prejudice, and unite communities in pursuit of a shared, fairer tomorrow. The soft hum of the evening settled over Cedarwood. But beneath the calm surface, a storm was quietly building. One fueled not by anger alone, but by the steady, determined voices of witnesses who refused to let injustice fade into silence. Among them was Mia, a young cashier at the local supermarket, whose simple act of recording the confrontation between Officer Kyle Matthews and Jason Bennett became a catalyst for change far beyond what anyone had imagined. Mia wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. She was an ordinary woman, just doing her job, scanning groceries, managing customers. Yet when she saw the tension escalate, a gun drawn in the middle of a crowded store, something inside her shifted. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and began recording. Every moment, every word, every expression was captured with crystal clarity. Later, she would tell friends and family, "I just knew I had to document it. If no one sees it, then how can anything change?" Her courage to witness and record became a beacon. It was a digital testament to the truth, unaltered and undeniable. But Mia was not alone. Across Cedarwood, neighbors, shoppers, and bystanders also watched, some in disbelief, some with growing outrage. Slowly, they began to speak up, to share their accounts, to stand with Jason, and demand justice. The power of witnesses, ordinary people choosing to raise their voices, transformed a personal encounter into a community movement. One evening, Mia sat with Jason at a small cafe. The weight of recent events hung heavily between them, but there was also a flicker of hope. Jason looked at her, gratitude in his eyes. "You didn't just record a video. You helped us tell the world what really happened. That means everything." Mia smiled softly. "I was just doing what anyone should do. When we stay silent, injustice thrives. But when we speak out, even just one person, it's like lighting a candle in the dark." That simple metaphor encapsulated a profound truth. Each witness was a tiny flame. Alone, a candle might seem fragile, but together they could illuminate the darkest corners of society, exposing the shadows where prejudice and abuse hide. This role of witnesses was not just about recording or speaking. It was about responsibility, recognizing that every individual holds the power to demand accountability, to support victims, to foster change. Community meetings began to form. People shared not only their own stories, but also expressed solidarity with one another. They organized watch groups, advocated for transparent investigations, and pushed local leaders to act decisively. The presence of witnesses gave legitimacy and strength to the movement. It was harder for authorities to dismiss the truth when so many eyes were watching. However, standing up was not without risks. Mia and others faced backlash, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt. There were warnings to stay quiet, attempts to intimidate, and the persistent undercurrent of fear. Yet, the collective courage prevailed. The community learned that protecting one another, sharing truth, and holding firm in the face of adversity were the pillars on which justice could be built. Mia's story also highlighted the modern realities of justice in a digital age. Smartphones and social media had become powerful tools. A single video could break through walls of silence, galvanize public opinion, and spur official action. But with this power came responsibility. The responsibility to capture truth accurately, to respect the dignity of those involved, and to use this tool wisely. Jason often reflected on the incredible impact that the community's support and Mia's brave recording had on his path forward. "It's not just about me," he said, during a local interview. "It's about all of us standing up for what's right, shining a light on injustice wherever it hides." The ripple effect of witness courage extended far beyond Cedarwood. Other towns and cities took notice, inspired to empower their citizens to become guardians of truth. Nationwide discussions emerged on the crucial role of witnesses in promoting justice and accountability. Experts in law enforcement reform and civil rights echoed this sentiment. They stressed that training officers to respect not only the law, but also the eyes of the community was essential. Policing could no longer operate in secrecy or isolation. It must be transparent and answerable to those it serves. In classrooms and public forums, educators began teaching young people about the power of bearing witness, not just as passive observers, but as active participants in democracy. The lesson was clear: justice requires more than laws. It needs people willing to stand up and be heard. The story of Mia and the community of Cedarwood became a modern parable, a reminder that while one voice can start a fire, it is the chorus of witnesses that sustains it. Each person, regardless of their role or background, has the capacity to light the way toward a fairer, more just society. As the seasons changed, the small flames kindled by Mia and her neighbors grew into a steady blaze, illuminating paths forward for countless others caught in the shadows of injustice. Their courage taught a vital truth in the fight for justice. Witnesses are not mere bystanders. They are the lifeblood of change, the keepers of truth, and the hope for a better tomorrow. The courtroom was packed to the brim, the air thick with anticipation, and a weight that felt almost tangible. Families, community members, activists, and reporters had gathered, all waiting to hear the final verdict in a case that had shaken the very foundation of Cedarwood's trust in its police force. At the center of this storm was Kyle Matthews, the young officer whose reckless actions had nearly cost a man his life and sparked a fire of outrage that swept through the town and beyond. Inside the courtroom, Jason Bennett sat quietly, hands folded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and hope. Beside him, his attorney Sarah Collins reviewed notes, prepared to listen and then to act on the judge's decision. The judge's gavel came down, calling the room to order, and the moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. After thorough consideration of all evidence, witness testimonies, and the gravity of the situation, the judge began. Voice steady but solemn, this court finds Officer Kyle Matthews guilty of misconduct, excessive use of force, and violation of civil rights. He is hereby dismissed from the police force and shall undergo mandatory retraining on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. A collective sigh swept through the courtroom, some exhalations of relief, others tears held back, but all felt the undeniable weight of justice served. For many in Cedarwood, the verdict was more than just a sentence. It was a statement. It was proof that even those who wield great power are not above accountability. It was a validation of the community's voice, the witnesses who refused to be silent, and the resilience of a man who stood his ground in the face of danger. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans. When the news spread, cheers erupted, echoing through the streets like a balm for wounds too long ignored. Jason stepped out onto the courthouse steps, flanked by supporters, his voice firm but full of gratitude. "This verdict is not just my victory," he said, looking out over the crowd. "It belongs to every person who stood with me, who raised their voice against injustice. It is a reminder that justice may come slowly, but it is never out of reach when we persist." The police department, once shaken by the scandal, began implementing reforms. Chief Robert Anderson, aware of the damage to public trust, spearheaded new training programs focused on empathy communication and anti-bias education. Officers were encouraged to see their role not as enforcers above the law, but as guardians accountable to the communities they served. In the weeks and months that followed, the ripple effects of the verdict extended beyond Cedarwood. Other departments took notice, reviewing their own policies and the conduct of their officers. Advocates used the case as an example to push for nationwide reforms, highlighting the importance of transparency and community oversight. Yet the road to healing was far from over. Jason, like many victims of police misconduct, faced ongoing challenges. Emotional scars that did not fade with a verdict, the burden of reliving trauma in public, and the need to rebuild a sense of safety in a society that had so starkly revealed its fractures. Still, his story became a beacon. It inspired educational programs in schools about civil rights and the importance of standing up against discrimination. It fueled conversations in neighborhoods about empathy and justice, bridging gaps between diverse communities. For Kyle Matthews, the consequences were life-altering. Stripped of his badge, he was forced to confront not just the legal repercussions, but also the moral reckoning of his actions. Some saw his firing as a harsh penalty, others a necessary step toward accountability. His story served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked prejudice and the critical need for ongoing training and self-awareness within law enforcement. The final verdict in Cedarwood was a testament to the power of courage. Courage to witness, to speak out, and to demand justice. It proved that while the wheels of justice may grind slowly with collective resolve, they do turn. In reflecting on the case, Sarah Collins remarked, "Justice is more than a legal outcome. It is a process that involves community transparency and unwavering commitment. This verdict signals a beginning, not an end." And so the community of Cedarwood moved forward wiser, stronger, and more united. The scars of the past remained, but so did the promise of change. They knew that vigilance was essential, that the fight against injustice requires constant effort and solidarity. In the end, the story of Kyle Matthews and Jason Bennett was more than a tale of wrongdoing and punishment. It was a profound lesson that justice, when pursued with patience and persistence, can heal wounds, restore faith, and inspire a brighter future for all. The room was filled with a solemn yet hopeful energy as Jason Bennett stepped forward to address the crowd gathered in the community center. The walls, once silent witnesses to stories of pain and struggle, now echoed with voices united in a shared purpose. Jason's voice, steady but charged with emotion, cut through the murmurs. "I stand here, not just as a victim, but as a testament to what persistence can achieve." He began looking across the sea of faces, young and old, diverse and united. "This journey has been long and fraught with challenges, but it has taught me something invaluable: the power of our voices. Each of us carries a spark of change inside us. When we dare to speak, to stand up, and to demand justice, we become unstoppable." Beside him, Sarah Collins, the determined attorney who had fought tirelessly by his side, nodded with a quiet strength. She took the microphone next, her tone calm yet fierce. "Jason's story is not unique," she said. "Too many suffer in silence, fearing retaliation or disbelief. But silence is complicity. If we do not raise our voices against injustice, we allow it to thrive. The fight for fairness, equality, and respect is a fight we must all engage in, whether we are in the courtroom, the streets, or within our own circles." The crowd listened intently, the weight of the moment sinking deep. This was more than a recounting of events. It was a call to arms, a rallying cry for justice. The message was clear. Change begins with individuals who refuse to accept the status quo. Jason continued his words, now imbued with a sense of urgency and resolve. "This verdict was a victory. Yes, but it's just one battle in a much larger war. We cannot afford to be passive observers. It is our duty to hold those in power accountable, to educate ourselves and others, and to build communities grounded in respect and empathy." He paused, then spoke with a gravity that silenced the room. "Remember this. When silence becomes complicity, Speaking up is not a choice, it's a duty. The impact of that statement lingered heavy and electrifying. Faces in the crowd reflected determination and awakening. It was a reminder that justice is not delivered by chance. It is forged through courage and collective action. As the event drew to a close, Sarah added a practical note. If you want to hear more stories like Jason's stories that expose the truth and inspire change, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Knowledge is power, and sharing these stories fuels the movement. The applause that followed was thunderous, a sound of unity and resolve. Outside the city, lights flickered, bearing witness to a community refusing to be silent any longer. This moment was not just an end, but a beginning, a spark igniting a brighter, more just future. In the quiet that followed, one truth stood clear. The power to change the world resides within every voice brave enough to speak up. Before we wrap up, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Staying informed and sharing these stories is how we keep the fight for justice alive. And remember this, when silence becomes complicity, speaking up is not a choice, it's a duty. If you stay quiet, you're part of the problem. So what side will you choose?